So, in this week's video, I'm going to be talking about 5 lessons that I learned from reading Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being. Lesson number 1 is the Creative Act philosophy. So, I know this book has been getting a lot of attention recently, and after watching several Rick Rubin interviews, I thought it was time for me to order it too. I already had an idea of what the book would be like, but I don't think I was as prepared as I thought I was going to be for how it's actually structured. You see, the book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin, isn't actually a book about Rick Rubin, and it's not a book about his life or any of that, the music, the art. It's nothing to do with that. It's more of a book about life. And what I found is that there's no really a set way of kind of reading the book, because usually we would read it from the first page to the last. But with a book such as this, you can almost instantly open it on any page and start reading, and you can go back to several pages or go forward to some. You can skip pages, you can skip chapters. It's more about you actually changing your perception of thoughts whilst you're reading it to help you in the challenges or the creative kind of the creative blocks that come along the way. It's truly setting the scene for how artists in all forms can transform their approach to their work and their creative endeavors. And I think in this stage in time, whether you're an architect, whether you're an artist or a designer, I think it's really important for you to think deeply about the work that you want to produce. The second lesson I've learned is to embrace the creative mindset. The idea of creativity as a state of mind rather than a task, and how this accounts for sort of the ways in which artists put themselves in the right environment, the right frame of mind, when they do choose to do their work, instead of thinking of it as more of a tick box exercise and kind of a list that they have to work through. Place yourself in that environment, place yourself in that right frame of mind before carrying your work out, because you're going to see so much more improvement, not just in your own work, and your professional work, but also in your personal life as well. And this lesson, I believe, will truly benefit designers in the long term because of their change in perspective. And this perspective shift is truly going to kind of subconsciously open up other avenues for them to kind of explore, but also the way that they perceive their own work and the processes that they undergo in order to complete their work. Now, it could be said that through embracing the creative mindset, it kind of boosts other factors such as productivity, innovation, and even kind of satisfaction in creative pursuits. But without the scientific data, I wouldn't double down kind of on those factors yet, because these are just my current observations of the book. Nevertheless, this concept of realigning oneself and fully pursuing the act of being will no doubt bring rewards in one form or another, because it could be through your creative output or in your perception of being. And you can break that down for yourself, your creative being or kind of your non-creative being. And I'm sure there's many papers written about that, kind of the psychology that goes on in a designer's mind, and how they're able to kind of create those distinctions, or if they're not able to create those distinctions. So whilst reading the book, it's for you to decide how kind of all of these, I don't even know how to put them, tips, tricks, and kind of the quotes from Rick Rubin, how they're able to benefit you and how they relate to the challenges that you're going through as a designer. Lesson 3 introduces strategies for cultivating creativity. The book is full of practical, actionable techniques that have inspired a way of being, so to speak. It's not always so much about kind of Rubin inflicting his own opinion as mentioned in lesson 1, but about him addressing common challenges and offering solutions to overcome these creative blocks that you're going through and we're going through as designers. For example, Rubin states that there's a time for certain ideas to arrive and they find a way to express themselves through us. Many times, a lot of us, me included, kind of push for a certain desired outcome to present itself, and we don't fully know the consequences that will come as a result of that. So we become so fixated on the destination that we forget about the whole process, the creative journey that we're meant to go on along the way before we reach that outcome. And because we become so fixated on it, it kind of deters that whole feeling of satisfaction that we get from creating the final product, so to speak. And when I say product, I don't necessarily mean a physical object. The reader can break down Rubin's quotes in the book and apply them to certain situations that are kind of happening for them right now, and certain things and challenges that they're going through as young designers. Because it can be easy for us just to read these empowering words in the book and get kind of short, sharp bursts of motivation, but without placing any actions behind our thoughts, then they will just truly remain just as that, just thoughts. And this brings me to lesson 4, which is to put the creative act into practice. As the last lesson concluded, it's all about putting our thoughts and ambitions into practice and develop our way of working. There are some principles that can be enforced to approach this way of being, and they include, number 1, simplicity and minimalism. So to strive to strip away unnecessary elements and focus on the core of our creative project, whether it's writing, designing, or any form of other creative expression, removing this kind of cloud of clutter that we have, and it could present itself in physical form as well, the clutter on our workspaces, it can lead to a more impactful result. Number 2 is embracing constraints. Limitations can lead to creative solutions and force you to think beyond what we initially thought of being possible. Instead of viewing constraints as limitations, we can see them as opportunities to explore new avenues. Number 3 is creating a comfortable environment. And this relates to kind of the point that I said before about finding a workspace that puts you at ease and encourages your creative flow. And number 4 is collaboration and communication. The significance of collaborating with others to bring fresh ideas and new perspectives to your work is so highly underrated. Sharing ideas, getting feedback, and insights can lead to unexpected and often at times exciting outcomes. This is particularly applicable to architecture students because of my history of kind of studying architecture for 5 years. I know how valuable this is. By collaborating and communicating with your peers, you can learn so much from each other. And if you're not already doing it in architecture school, then I implore you to start now. But this can also be applicable to other design students by pushing this notion to all of you in the creative industries as a whole, because it's going to be hugely beneficial. And finally, lesson 5 opens up the conversation for us to work towards our own forms of authentic expression. The creative act encourages authenticity and self-expression in creative work. By using his kind of own life as a precedent through which he's devised a philosophy and a way of being, Rubens' words actually enable the readers to reflect on personal growth and fulfillment that arise from aligning with this way of thinking and this way of working towards creativity. Recognizing that not everything has to be polished to perfection, and that by recognizing imperfections, it actually makes your work more relatable and more human in a way. And personally, I think that one big aspect of kind of working towards authenticity is this concept and notion of experimenting more and taking more risks. To not be afraid of stepping out of our comfort zones, to try new techniques, new styles, and new approaches. These are all good things that we kind of think are going to take away from the credibility or so-called credibility that we've brought up for ourselves. But if we're not willing to develop and push further in the ways that we're thinking, then we can't expect our work to match it either. And I always say this in the architecture videos I make, but it really is about iteration and refinement. To not settle for kind of the first version of the work we make, but to keep refining it and defining that body of work until we're satisfied with it. But even now that I'm saying kind of until we're satisfied with it, not necessarily working towards the idea of satisfaction means that it's going to be the best outcome possible. And that relates back to the whole idea of that communication and collaborating with your peers and others in the space too. And sometimes that process could take a couple hours, but often than not, it will take days, weeks, months, or depending on the project, it could take you years until you realize that product that you've made, what you want it to be at the end. So there's 5 lessons that I've learned from reading The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the book, if you've read it yet or if you haven't. I highly recommend you purchasing it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.